Hello and welcome to this video. This is your art teacher, Mr. Aguilar, and today we're going over how to draw a nose. So we're just going to be taking notes today, and I'll be looking away from time to time because I zoomed all the way in, and I don't want to make sure that I go off camera. So drawing the nose, we're going to look at our basic structures of the nose today, and we're really just going to look at the front of the nose. Put out other videos where we'll look at nose at angles, but today our lesson is let's learn the shapes and the forms of the nose. So there's four things that we need to know, right? So we're just going to type in four things about the nose. All right, number one, we're going to look at the brow, and that's right above the bridge of your nose, which is our second thing. And that leads us into the tip or the ball of our nose. And then we're going to look at the nostril. Okay, so all of these things make the nose, and we're also going to look a little bit at how it connects to the rest of our face. So I generally would recommend always looking at photos from doing this. I'm going to do something very, very generic today. And we're just going to look at our basic T. And the basic T is just setting up the face, and it's useful for things like this. The basic T doesn't really work when you're looking at face at an angle or sideways. So this is really just a teaching tool. And we're going to be talking about proportions, and we're going to be talking about averages or norms. So normally speaking, our eyes are one eye length apart. So if you take the length of your eye, usually the distance between your eyes is one length. So we just want to loosely measure that out. And then your nose is typically an eye length and a half. So we're going to say that's going to be where the bottom of the nose is. So this is our basic teeth. And it's just for setting up when we're learning about how to construct the face. You can indicate the eyes. You want to just kind of draw a rough eye shape. It doesn't have to look like a real eye at this point. All we're doing is blocking in shape, saying this is where the eye is going to go, and we want to get the size of the eye correct. We will add some other elements in here, but again, we're talking about proportion and scale. So one thing about the nose is stereotypically, the nose aligns with your tear ducts. Okay, and we'll look at a side profile too. This isn't 100%. Some people have very tapered, narrow noses, and they're going to fall inside of that boundary that's formed by your tear ducts. Some people have wider, broader noses, and they're going to go slightly outside. We're talking very small distances. We're talking less than a 16th of an inch when we're drawing. On a human face, we're talking less than an eighth of an inch. So these are very, very tiny adjustments, but visually they do change the appearance. So let's talk about where we put the brow and the bridge and how we know where that area is. So I'm just going to draw a side of the face, generic again. Okay. And that's going to be our forehead going into our brow. And then we have the curve. And we're going to put the nose in. And then I'm going to indicate the nostril. Now, this curve right here, this is where our brow, this is where the brow meets the bridge of the nose. And if we take this line straight in and go straight up from the nostril, this is generally where our eye is going to be. Our eye is going to be right where this curve is. And we've covered the eye. The eye is basically an orb that's sitting in your face. So this is all going to line up right here. And this is why when we're drawing and indicating our bridge, you're going to see that curve right here. And I'd recommend working off a photograph because if you print it out, you can actually measure it out and you can see where everything belongs. And that'll just help you with a better understanding of the nose. So let's say we have a narrow bridge, and usually that's an indicator of a sharp nose. And then we're going to look at the shape or tip of the nose. I'm going to go with what I call upside down acorn because that is the shape of my tip. And when you're doing the bottom of the nose, a lot of people, when they're learning, they want to draw the nostrils here at the bottom. That's not where they go. You want to move up a bit onto the shape, and they come right up here. And if you need to, you can just draw a line straight across, and that'll help you with your nostril placements. And you want to make sure that one nostril is not down here and another nostril is up here. Now, nostrils are just basically a flap of skin, and they don't attach. Some people will try attaching it to the hole in the nostril, and really it's a flap that's going to go underneath, and it's going to come out. Okay, you can see how this, this aligns, boom and boom. Okay. Now, if I have a tapered nose, it might fall a little bit inside and a little bit inside, less than a 16th of an inch, but it makes a dramatic difference visually. And then if you have a broad, flat nose, it might fall an 1/8 of an inch or 1/16th of an inch, in this case, this size, on the outside of that boundary, and it's going to look really big. So it's just perception. And we're going to explain, how all of this kind of fits together, because our nose sticks out. And then our eye socket actually sinks into our face. So the deepest part of your shadow is actually going to be here. This is the deepest part of your face. And we're just going to kind of lay out where everything is. So, sorry if I went off camera again. I'm going to be looking back and forth. Here's our basic layout of the nose. Now, we need to understand why people draw things a certain way. So you'll see a lot of people when they're learning to draw a nose, they will do this. They kind of draw this funky shape here. And then they'll draw like a little bird with some loops. And this is how people learn to start drawing noses, especially when you're young. This doesn't exist. So you can see my face. I don't have two lines here on the side of my face. So why do people tend to draw noses this way? And the reason is they're seeing a shadow, they perceive a shadow, and they're drawing that shadow as a line. Okay, that line doesn't exist. And in fact, the shadow that you perceive only exists at certain angles. So I'm going to explain this really fast. I'm going to draw a mountain. Okay, and this mountain is going to be steep with a narrow ridge. Okay, and we're going to say that this top right here, that is going to be our bridge of the nose. And this is going to be the side, where it just kind of angles off. Now, the sharper the bridge, the more angular or the more angle of descent you're going to get on the side of the mountain. If I draw it, say something that's more of a hill shape, you're going to get less of an angle, okay? So this is going to be flatter, and you're going to have less of an angle. And when light's hitting, so we're going to say our light's over here, it's going to cast a shadow on this side of the mountain or this side of the hill. And that's basically what's happening with our nose. So we have our bridge, we have our brow, and then we have the side of the nose, which is right here. So if we want to draw this in a really, really basic form, make sure I don't go off camera here. Our nose is going to be basically like this. This is basically going to be our nose, okay? So that is the basic overall shape, even though that's, not very good. But it tells you that you have a flat plane here, and that it angles off here, and it angles off here. So when we go back up to this one, we can draw our contours, and our contours are going to look like this. And your cheekbone is round, so this contour is going to have like a little valley, and then it's going to come up over the cheek. And this is why when light's hitting on one side, you'll get a shadow and a shadow. So we'll go down here and we'll draw that again. We'll add some shadows. So again, I would always recommend looking at photos when you're doing this, even though you're not going to try to draw realistically. So there's my eye length, there's my eye length, there's my eye length. So even though I'm not trying to draw realistically, as far as the eyes are concerned, I do want some kind of placement marker there, because that's going to help you align everything. Okay, I'm going to draw, again, this going into my bridge. Maybe add an eyelid, Okay, and I'm going to draw more of a rounded nose, and this brings me to another subject that I forgot about, but we'll get into it in just a second. And then I'm going to draw that shape in for my nostrils. Let's bring this in. I'll make this one a little bit rounder. So I made this a little bit flat. Let's get this going. Okay, and what we're going to say is we are going to bring in our light source up here. And real fast, when we do this, we should indicate where we're going to get that shadow. So I forgot about that too, my bad. So as the nose comes under, you're going to get a shadow. Okay, and I'm off camera again. So this shadow is going to be right here. It's going to be the under part of the nose. And then over here, it's going to be this part. So we have our shape, we have our light source is coming down. This is our bridge. So our light's going to hit. That means we're going to have a highlight, probably a highlight here. We want to indicate where our shadows are going to be, which is going to be here and here. And this is going to bring me up to my next point. So I'm going to deviate really fast from this, and I'm going to draw down here. I'm going to draw a real rectangle, or I suppose this would be a cylinder. I'm going to draw a ball. And again, this is just to show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to draw another ball here and another ball here. Okay, so these three things represent our nose, and then we have the side of our nose as it comes down. So we're saying light is coming from this angle. That means this side of my cylinder is going to be in shadow. And that also means that this side of my sphere is going to be in shadow. And then this is the sphere of the nostril. That's going to be in shadow. And then you're going to get a bit of a, kind of like a little shadow there from where the light's sitting. And then as this slopes off on this angle, that shadow is going to fall down too. And when we look at this, this is basically how we have to render our nose. And then this sphere, and this sphere is going to cast a shadow underneath. And this is what you have to think about when you're drawing a nose, right? So you have a spherical object, spherical object, spherical object, a cylinder, right? And then it's falling off at an angle. So when we take that and we apply it to our actual nose shape, okay, that means we're going to have a shadow underneath here, and it's going to be darkest on this side going down. Let me fill in the nostrils a bit. We're going to have a shadow underneath, and we'll have a bit of a casted shadow. And that casted shadow will be right here. Let me darken this in just a little bit so you guys can see it a little bit clearer. Okay, so if we look at this and light's coming from there, that means this side of the nose is going to be shaded. And same thing with this part of the bridge. I'm going to erase some of this really fast or lighten it up. This is going to go into this shadow here. And then it's going to fall into where our cheek is. And this is the angle going down. So this is that angle going down, right? And the values in between are what we call our midtones. And there's going to be a shadow on this side from the fold. Okay, and then we have where the light's hitting. So this is going to have some mid-tone ranges. This will have a bit of a value. You're going to get a shadow here because it's, again, above the eye. And this is the deepest part of our face. So that's going to have a shadow, and then it's going to taper off really fast. And then you have your cheek, which is on this side. So that's going to give a bit of a shadow actually going in this direction. and then we'll put just our skin tone, and then again, your highlights are going to be here. So when you start rendering a nose, it's important to understand how this three-dimensional form is interacting with light. So here is the eyelid. This side's going to get shadow because it's round. This side's going to get shadow because it's round. And then right here on this cheek, this side's going to get shadowed because the cheek is coming up this direction. So you're going to get light right here. And when you start understanding your three-dimensional forms and you start understanding where everything goes, it makes shading and rendering a lot easier because you know where things have to go, like where shadows have to go. And you can start rendering. And again, this is just a generic nose, not looking off, but you can see how it is starting to look more three-dimensional just by taking and understanding the different structures, how things are in 3D perspective. If we break it down into basic forms like cylinder and three spheres, and really start to understand how it interacts with light. This is also important, understanding like a narrow bridge versus a wide bridge. So let's draw a couple more down here. And again, I'm going to do a basic T. And on this one right here, and this is why I want you to find photos of different faces, different sizes. I'm going to say here's my eyes, there's my eye length. Again, I don't really care about the eyes. We're not trying to render or draw the eyes. I just want to make sure that these lengths all kind of add up. And what I'm going to do on this one is I'm going to draw a wider bridge. So I'm going to say this is a wider bridge. And then I'm going to draw a little low. I'm going to draw more of a giant kind of egg shape. Like a bulbous type nose. And then off of this, I'm going to draw more rounded nostrils. And I want to point out a couple of things when I do this. Okay, so you can see that shape that's being formed, right? You can see how round it is. And you'll see that effective in the shadows. And this nose looks kind of big, and we can say that, it's going to be just kind of like this. And this is a broader, flatter nose. So that means you're going to have less of a drop off here. The angle's not going to be as steep. But when we bring from the tear ducts, you can see that this barely falls outside of that tear duct. Like it barely falls outside, but look how much wider the nose looks versus the other noses that are right on the line. Okay, this one is just outside the line, but it gives you that perception of being a much wider nose. And then when we start adding our values, it makes it look even bigger and wider. When reality is, there's barely any change. It's just perception. It's just a flat, broad bridge with a bigger tip of the nose, rounder nostrils, okay, and then you just start seeing that. And again, this has more in common with this than like the acorn shape. So when you're practicing, all I'm looking for is, are you drawing different shapes of noses? Are you understanding how these things interact with each other, how they interact with light? And this is where you can start building, accurate faces, because you're seeing the differences in the face, you're seeing the differences in the shape, and you're actually drawing what you see versus what's in here, which could be very generic. If I draw another one, I'm going to do like a really quick one. And this one's going to be opposite. This one's going to be very narrow. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a very narrow shape. So this would be like a very pointed nose, very narrow bridge, which is going to give the person like much sharper features. I'm going to come out here, and I'm going to draw the nostrils in. And if I come in and add my eye shapes, and I drop this line straight down, and I drop this line straight down, you're going to see that it's barely inside, right? It's barely inside, and you're getting this very steep drop off on the nose. But it's barely inside. It's right. You're talking a 1/16 of an inch on that. But you can see how vastly different these two noses look. One is going inside, the other one is going slightly outside of that line, and that's all it takes to create this huge difference in noses. So again, when you're doing this and practicing, do really quick searches. If you're stuck, look up celebrities that you know have certain facial features. So like if you know a celebrity or a singer, actor, whatever, they have a big nose, look up that person. If you know another person, an artist, has a very tiny tapered or very pointed nose, look up those people. That's the easiest way to find it. Or you can just randomly go into a Google search or Pinterest search and look for noses. So that's it. Look, this is all we're going over today for noses. We're primarily looking at what are our shapes and forms. The next step after this is looking and seeing what noses do at a different angle. So till next time, this is your art teacher, Mr. Aguilar, and I hope you learned something with today's lesson.